Hello, everybody. Was lunch good? Okay, so presentation will be again about DoS and DDoS. There's a little bit of overlap here, but we will look at it from a different kind of perspective. Okay. So for anybody that doesn't know us, we are Alfredo. This is Alfredo, Giordano. I work in Italy mostly as an internet provider. And I joined the MikroTik community recently, about a couple of years ago, basically. And my colleague here is Matthew Chantar. Let's introduce by himself.
Hi, my name is Matthew Chantar. I've been dealing with MikroTik for quite a while, since 2002. Moved ahead to become a trainer as well as a consultant as well. My background is not strictly related to service provisioning, ISP and work like that. It's more on the other side, on basically working in the field of betting and betting industry. So it's more looking at it from a corporate perspective and what you can do in this regard when it comes to DDoS, what we can do from our end. I'm originally from Malta, but recently relocated to Dublin. Well, already there since 2 years. Probably this must have been an issue with myself and Tom getting the idea, living close to each other in Dublin. Coincidentally, we got a bit an overlapping here on DDoS. But like I'm saying, his presentation was covering more from an ISP perspective and a larger bandwidth. We're all including a bit as well what one can do from a client side or from a solution installer when you are installing your MikroTiks as a CPs or at your clients to avoid certain situations as much as possible, where possible, basically. Alfredo and myself have started working together, providing training and consultancy. After we had trained the trainer together, we decided to start this joint venture. Also, we provide training. In many cases, we try and do it together. So in our opinion, being two trainers in a session helps even more to cover the material as best as possible. Okay, so jumping right in, denial of service attack. So basically an attack on a computer network that prevents legitimate use of its resources. So basically, we have someone who's going to try and affect our environment, maybe on purpose, trying to affect us by blocking services which we are trying to provide to our customers or to ourselves if we are a corporate environment, basically. How does this affect us? It affects software systems. If we're running a web server, if we're running a load balancer, if we're running a web server, then if network equipment, it could affect routers, switches, load balancers. We're going to see how big DOS attacks can basically be and how this can affect us. It also affects, obviously, servers and end users' PCs. Usually, in many cases, we see that the denial of service attacks originally start from hacked systems, hacked servers, or hacked end user PCs.
So anybody might think that, okay, but this is not happening to me. This is not happening right now. Do you have an idea of how many attacks are actually happening at the moment? We have prepared something for you to have a simple sketch up of the situation. This is a actual map from a service called DoS, and it's actually taken from live from their client around the world. They do what is basically called the IDS. They tunnel the traffic to you, they pick it up and clean it for you. It is an expensive service, but it serves us now to understand how many attacks are actually going on at the moment. And this is only a perspective from their point of view, which is pretty big because they serve pretty big ISPs around the world. But as you can see, the United States has been targeted, and now also Europe at this very moment. We can look at the main nation on the attack origins on the left side, and on the country targeted on the other side.
This also shows us some the service type of type of attacks the system is currently seeing at the moment, basically. Okay.
So going back to the presentation, basically every attack, every anatomy of an attack, and the detection of it has to start from where the network begins. And network, to my point of view, and it begins from the OSI layer. An attack can basically occur at any level of the OSI. The OSI is always a good starting point to understand and troubleshoot any network behavior. And this is especially true when, like we've seen in the morning, network is under particular stress, like under a DDoS attack. So let's do a little analysis of how an attack can occur at any level of the OSI. Basically, you can attack the application level, and we are familiar with that kind of attack. Basically, you attack then the program that is running the server. So basically, post large PDF gets. Then you can attack the presentation layer. That gets complicated because presentation level can be SSL, and SSL inspection is pretty heavy to run on. Then you can attack basically any level like telnet, and also you can conduct an attack directly to the stack, which is basically level 4. Then where you can find some Syn attack. ICP flooding is also, but when it comes to level 2 and level 1, then we are talking about somebody inside on the network, basically. And when we are talking about level 1, we are basically talking about bombs. Because somebody has to come there and actually pull the cables, okay? So let's go over it. DOS attack are normally unable to attack large bandwidth websites. One upstream client cannot generate enough bandwidth to cripple major websites with larger bandwidth capabilities. This is normal. If you want to attack Google, you won't expect to do it with a very small pipe of bandwidth, okay? But this is related to DOS attack. So it's an attack that points to denial some certain service that is running on a server. But what about distributed attacks? So when we can actually amplify the attack and distribute it around the world. As described by Webopedia, DDoS is a type of DOS attack where multiple compromised systems known as bots or zombies, which are usually infected with computers infected with Trojan, are used to target a single system, causing a denial of service attack. DOS can be a very large scale, potentially bringing down a whole network or an internet service provider. But how big this can get?
We can check a bit what happened in the past years, and maybe, I mean, from what Tom was explaining on his network, you can easily, especially nowadays, we're saying, okay, we have one user tries to do a DOS attack on his own. Well, with just his upstream provider, upstream bandwidth which is available, maybe has 1 megabit, maybe has 20 megabits, it's not really enough to do such an attack. But maybe once you manage to have a system where, you know, as soon as we put SSH, we put a Linux server on, we see people trying to get access to it. Once we get a lot of systems which have been compromised, all these systems together, especially nowadays with more and more upstream bandwidth being given to the end user, it's becoming more possible to launch such an attacks. So basically we can see one of the real life examples taking back 27 March 2013, where there was an attack on Spam House which reached around 300 gigabits per second, which is massive. I mean, we're looking at a bit of a graph. Sometimes you have a provider has 1 gigabit, 2 gigabits, 3 gigabits. Here we're speaking about 300 gigs in total, basically. And again, this was a DNS reflection where servers out there, it could be, even as we're saying down here, it could have been MikroTik devices with DNS allowed on the WAN interface, on the public. Someone sends a request with a faked source, and MikroTik sends the reply back as a bigger packet to this spoofed IP address. And that would affect a DNS reflection at such a size, basically. We have another example which is even bigger than that, which was directed against Cloudflare, which the idea of Cloudflare itself is exactly that, to try and help people avoid a situation of being DDoSed. There was a DDoS target directly to them, reaching 400 gigabits per second. In this case, the NTP reflection was used. Okay? And it is the situation which we are trying to bring knowledge about in this case, where we have installed a couple of MikroTiks, they're on the internet, they have internet connection, and the clients start calling us, listen, my internet is not working well, or it's crashing, or it's now working and then it stops. Then we go in and we notice either the CPU usage of the MikroTik has gone up, or could be any device, basically. So what's happening in that case, someone is attacking our services, our legitimate services, which should be working well, but because they are not well protected, they're being abused to launch an attack. Okay? Are we at such risks for such an attacks? Yeah. Especially if you are a bigger an ISP, or if you are a corporate, a company doing something which might annoy someone else, like we're saying, you can easily be a target. And if you're an ISP and one of your clients is a target, then it is going to affect you, and it's going to affect even other clients within your network. So a botnet, also known as zombie army, is a resource which is easily available to be used against us. These are infected computers located around the world which can be rented to launch such an attack. Just by putting out a Google search, we can get a return of such websites which have a list of such servers which have been hacked, and you can pay for them. You can pay, for example, $180 and you get computers in the US. Then you can pay $240 and you get some other computers which are located in the United Kingdom. You can pay $35 and you get some around 1,000 infected computers which are located randomly around the world.
Please take your ticket for the reservation.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's happening here? As we were saying before, an attack can be conducted on any level. Let's concentrate on router level, where we are actually working at layer 3 and 4. And at firewall level, where we are actually looking at level from 4 to 7. So what are the DoS protection can be implemented? RP filter, already mentioned by Tom this morning, routing black hole as well. And on the firewall, we have address list, session limit, Syn cookies. So what happens at router level? Kind of attack that can be mitigated. We find Smurf attack, IP address spoofing, malformed trace route attack. So Smurf attacks, they're not an army of actually zombies, blue mans. It's actually the name of an old program used to conduct such an attack. Nowadays not very much common because the protocol has switched off the requirement of forwarding the broadcast address. Basically was an attack conducted against the broadcast address. Every router would forward that broadcast to the internal network that would be saturated with packets. IP address spoofing is one instead of the most common techniques, and we will see something about that. You can actually spoof, so utilize or forge a packet with an IP address of your own AS or some other AS to actually pretend you are something else. So you are actually injecting the request, so the reply will come to the original source, which is normally the target. As well, as Tom was saying this morning, every protocol that triggers a response, a reply that is bigger than actually the request can be used as DoS amplification. This was also the case of traceroute, while traceroute was not actually handling very well the response time, and you can actually have traceroute send UDP or ICMP packets and not waiting for the response forever. One of the solutions, unicast reverse part forwarding, also stated in the RFC 3704, is used to stop spoof attacks on the outbound side. the related settings from MikroTik we can find in the IP settings menu. If somebody you are used to the old version, they were actually in the firewall part, but now they are in the new menu IP settings. We have three options there. Default is no, so it's disabled. We have the strict and the loose version. Basically what's happening here. So the router will ask to himself, do I have a matching entry for the source IP on the routing table? Okay, so I will accept that packet, and that's the loose version. Okay, it will just check if there are a matching entry on the routing table. That's why default routing on the border gateway is not just good. So in the strict version, what happens is the router will also check if the packet is arriving on the same interface the router would use to reach the originator of the packet. That's the strict version. Strict version usage is limited. Why? Because the nature of the internet, the nature of the routing of the internet is asymmetric. So most of the time, for the routing table, the router will try to send out the packet as fast as possible, the best route he has, but will receive the packet coming in from another interface, and that's actually a limit. The underlying principle of RP filter is to block outbound traffic if the IP does not belong to the subnet that resides on the line. What are the drawbacks of this? To be truly effective, RP filter should be implemented in front of every potential source of attack. If asymmetric routing is taking place on the border gateway, then only loose method can be used. And there is the bad one is actually that sometimes attacker can spoof source IPs from within the same autonomous system, making this strategy easily vulnerable. And the bigger the autonomous system is, the bigger the problem becomes, because you can actually spoof a lot of IPs, and they are within the AS, so you cannot intercept them on the border gateways. Okay, so Matthew, would you like to keep on
maybe
going
to add,
on?
yeah, I'll go on the black hole to add to this one, the last part. Well, basically what we are saying here is that you are an ISP, and you have thousands of IPs, and the same one of your own clients is faking the IP address of the other clients. So basically, when you put the filters on your gateway routers so that nothing leaves your network which doesn't belong to you, still someone is doing that maliciously. Why? Because he's taking your own IPs, because he's your client, but instead of using his own IP, he's taking the IPs of other clients on the network, faking them, spoofing them. So then you can't really identify straight away what is happening. Obviously, it is easier in that case to try and identify who is doing this. But it, yet again, takes more work, and this feature will not help us in that case to solve such a problem. The other option we have is routing black hole. The underlying idea is to black hole offending AS from the local network, so traffic is not routed from the border router to the LAN. So basically, this will help us internally. We say, okay, this network is sending malicious traffic, so we add it in the black hole list, so then everyone in our network will ignore it, basically. The IP being targeted is no longer reachable, but the rest of the network stays up. Okay. We have advantages and disadvantages of routing black hole as well. Our attacked IP range will appear dead to the attacker. Why? Because the only thing we could do, we could say, listen, this range, this IP address which is being attacked on our network is no longer reachable. So our client has gone offline, and that is basically what the attacker is trying to achieve. But in that case, what we're doing, we are making them think that they have succeeded, while we can still exchange data with everyone else. The disadvantage, depending on the type of attack, lots of packets could be sent using spoof source IP addresses. It could be the case that if we also have servers with the same flow, we have equipment, network, router servers, which have a bot on them, basically, or a misconfigured DNS service or a misconfigured NTP service, these would be targeted on our network, so packets, a small packet is sent to them, and a bigger packet is sent out, basically causing a root reflection from our network. So basically would be helping the attacker on the other end. Our network would be doing that. So we have to be aware, and that is why monitoring is important, to try and understand and figure out what's happening in the traffic in our network.
So basically what's happening here, that the network you are accusing is actually the victim. It's not really attacking the network, because you will see the attack coming from that network, but it's not the original network that it's been spoofed. Okay, so in this case, that won't help very much. And then we step to the firewall level, right? Okay, so what kind of attack can we mitigate at firewall level? Syn floats, the third packet attack, Syn+Sec, and reduce the impact of the reflection attack. So, do you think it's so hard to conduct such an attack? Because it is not. It is really not. Do you think we can actually make this router go off using only 20–25% of CPU of this other router? Shall check? No, you do? Windows P. There you go. Introduce this? Okay. Okay, so we have prepared for you two simple routers, nothing special, wireless disabled, no special rules, no special services, nothing. CPUs, you can look at it, it's almost 0% on both, so nothing is running on them. And in our forgery, we have prepared some special Syn injection forged packet here to inject to the other router. So we'll be basically targeting this router here, which is actually injecting also power, so it is just rebooted, okay, from this router here. And we will not use more than 30% CPU to do that. It's coming up. For the 2 bips, two MikroTik bips. There you go. Okay. So, two simple routers. Let's start. Let's take a look at the CPU values. So we are using a traffic generator to inject packets. As you can see, we are injecting around 20,000 packets per second. A little bit more, 30, okay. So look at the CPU of the second router, is spiking up. And let's have a look at the connection tracking. It's not coming up, isn't it? So we're actually conducting here the attack towards the stack. Okay, you can see that the CPU is 100%, the router is not really responsive. If we increase a little bit the amount of packets to be injected, it would be actually, and it did last time, reboot. Okay. Look at the CPU of the other router. That's what we are using to actually generate the packets is 25%. Not so much, really. And the packet we have used is a simple Syn packet that we have created using a template of the traffic generator. And another thing is that you can see all the entries in the connection tracking. Of course, we have to manipulate the source port to make it so big. Okay, you want to go on? You want to skip? So go back to the presentation. Yeah, keep going. Okay. Okay.
So basically, as we said at the firewall level, this could be an attack done to us on any equipment, which basically there's a TCP. This was an example of a TCP Syn attack. So this could happen to any TCP listening TCP port. It could be if we leave, for example, MikroTik port 80 for the management. It could be for the Winbox management on port 8291. We're going to now look into what issues we have, what things we can use to help us in this situation. And one of them would be the address list. The purpose of an address list is to use to group block of IP addresses. The nice thing about it is that such addresses can be added to these lists both statically and dynamically. And when we're starting to speak about adding such IP addresses dynamically to a list, it's when things start to become interesting. The requirement is to identify the host network exceeding our parameters and block them accordingly. So basically, if we have monitoring tools, if we know what the standard type of traffic of our network is, for example, I know our network usually is generating around 200 megabits per second and it has, 60,000 packets per second, we can use those as a metric to identify how our network is usually operating. And then we can use such rules, we can use firewall rules to say, listen, if we're getting more traffic than we normally get, we can then consider these as being an attack, and we could work accordingly.
So relevant RouterOS comments, let's put it bigger from the current slide. Yeah, let's keep it like this. So, we should. Okay, it's good. Okay. So, what's happening here? The command are related to this. What are we doing here? We are just adding to a list that we call suspicious for any destination port 23 for further elaboration in another part of the firewall. In this case, it was the filter part, where we can actually do something with this. The most important thing is that we can actually use all the matching powerful functions of the MikroTik to identify an IP address, and we can put such an IP address into a list, and then we can do anything we want with that list. In this case, we just use it to log for something. It's just an example. Doesn't have to be. Doesn't mean anything about the solution. Okay. What do we need to understand if the system was under attack? What was the first thing we did to look at when we were looking at the other router was actually the CPU. So the CPU, and we have another nice tool in MikroTik, which is System Profile. It will tell us actually what is happening and which part of the RouterOS is taking most of the CPU. Then we can look at the stats, and we can look at the connection, just as we did before, but we have to take care when looking at the connections. Why? Because the same fact that we are actually pulling the connection from the router will put some overload on the CPU itself. So the fact that we are actually looking at the connection, the table of the connection is coming towards us, will put the router some extra work. Okay. So another tool that is widely used to protect internal servers is a network address translation. I would say use with care. I will say why. It enables the translation of an IP address used within a network to a different IP address known within a network. As Tom would say, net saves a lot of S's, okay, around the world. That's probably why IPv6 is not really, being pushed, because maybe you don't want to expose any internal network, all the internal network to the internet. So what happens here is the commands are IP firewall NAT. What's the base idea? The base idea is we are using a server on the local network. This server has dedicated process on it, that's a mission critical service. So good guys are allowed to be DNetted, are allowed to access from the outside to the server. Bad guys, no DNet. So connection stops on the router. NAT is commonly accepted as a basic way to avoid DoS attack, not DDoS. It does not really solve the problem. It does not solve the problem. It moves it away by stopping unsolicited inbound traffic from reaching the host on the LAN. Depending on the intensity of the attack, NAT might turn against you. That's why I told you, use with care. So if you don't have an enough powerful router, actually what will happen that you will create a single bottleneck for the attacker, a single point to attack. So you are just like exposing your target, okay? And that would be the NAT router itself.
Another thing we can do with NAT, basically, from the corporate perspective, we have a service running, a website which is running in our corporate environment, and we have one internet connection, and we are hiding our server behind a NAT, basically, it's in a DMZ, and basically the internet connection which you have is being attacked. Hopefully, if we want this setup to be up and running, we would have a second internet connection. In many cases, if we are the service provider, I mean, there's nothing much we can do. If it's a big attack, we have to speak to someone else. The same if you're the client and your link is being attacked. You have to call your ISP. If you have two links, basically what you could do, you could help yourself with DNS before speaking to your ISP. Let me change the IP of my service from internet connection 1 to internet connection 2. Hopefully the person attacking you at that point in time, if he's really targeting you, until he notices you change your service to a different IP address, it gives you some time for your service to be back up and running on the other internet connection. It could be obviously that this guy decides to start attacking you as well on the other internet connection, but maybe by that time you have spoken to your first ISP and told him, listen, I'm being attacked. This is the guy attacking you. Can you black hole the IP address? And maybe that can take place. So
give us some time.
These are options which we can do as the end user, as the last end, to try and avoid a situation with a DOS.
Keep on.
The next feature we have, which helps in situations like the TCP Syn Attack, which we showed earlier, is the feature which is called Tcp Syn Cookie. The Tcp Syn Cookie is a technique used to resist SYN flood attacks by manipulating the sequence number in the TCP header. Basically, it's an option which does have a performance implication. So in general, this option should be avoided, should be left off. But in cases where we are seeing a high number of SYN attacks coming against us or coming to our network, it's an option, it's a feature which we could enable to try and reduce this effect.
So what is actually happening, how Syn cookies are implemented just in brief, what is happening that we are actually receiving the SYN, and we are manipulating the sequence number, so we are actually hiding, using a part of the header in the response to actually encode the sequence number and an SHA, which is a key that requires some process to be elaborate, and so we will know when the third packets come in, the SYN plus SEC packet, that it was from the original server that sent it. So basically we are authenticating the three-way handshake with Syn cookie. But this has some big performance implications that you won't see probably, but your client will, because it doesn't really break the protocol, but without all the TCP option available, it will lead to a reduction in performance, especially for the window scale. It would be nice if it could be enabled on port basis. That means I want TCP Syn cookies only for a service that is running on this port, but this is nowadays cannot be done yet because it's a limitation within the Linux kernel. Okay, we have just two options in MikroTik, just yes and no. Another tool that we can use, not actually to mitigate DOS attacks, but to detect them, is the PSD, port scan detection. It's a firewall matcher included in RouterOS used to detect TCP and UDP scans. How does it work? Basically, what it does is assigns a weight to low port range and another weight to high port range, and it will try to detect if the connections are coming from the same source to the same destination within a certain range of time, which is actually the delay threshold that you can see here. So if that, or if the sum of that goes over the threshold, then we'll match with the rule. This is actually what is happening. So what this means, if the instruction you're seeing on the screen means if a SYN packet with a port lower on 1024, then assign a weight of 3. And a SYN packet with a port higher than 1024, then assign a weight of 1. Sum the weights if the packet has been seen within 2 seconds, which is actually the timeout that you can see here. And if we reach a total of 18, then match. What do we do with that match? We are basically normally adding that to an address list. What have you seen in this morning presentation, Toms? Actually, it was kind of the attacker was studying Tom networks. No, there was a first attack towards network, like to see how the network would respond to such an attack, and then there was the real attack that led about 1 gigabit of throughput. Okay? So if we can detect the attack first, if we can actually at least alert us that somebody is conducting a port scan to understand how our internal network works, then we can basically be in alert and avoid this. So it's not a true aid against the DoS attack, but it can be useful to identify the offending networks. It can be used in combination with address list, provided that the connection tracking is already enabled on your firewall. PSD does not have an impact on resources such as CPU. But the best matcher to identify the flows that exceed a given limit is the DST limit. I mean, the best in my opinion as well. So IP firewall, chain prerouting in this case, what are we, protocol is DST limit 25.1. So what are we doing? Match packets until a given packet per second limit is exceeded for every destination IP address and IP destination and combination. So in this case, the matching is reversed. We are always matching until certain level has been reached. Okay, so we are matching, we are accepting a small level of connection. For example, in this case, we are using accept. And then whatever is over this limit that we set, we don't match anymore. So there must be another rule that basically stops it. So let's see if Matthew can help us in putting everything together. This is next slide. Oh, you want to, yeah, okay.
So basically, the first slide we have here is an example which can be taken from MikroTik Wiki, which is basically doing exactly that. So our aim here is to try and avoid people trying to brute force our services, trying to find a flaw. So when we're talking about port scan detection, the first thing we are trying to do is say, listen, if someone is trying to find flaws in our network, maybe open DNS servers, maybe open NTP servers, we try not to give him that advantage. So if we want, we try and say, okay, this guy is hammering too much, port 53, or this guy is trying to connect too much to port 123. So we want to allow him, in the case of the destination feature, to connect up to 5 times in a period of time. If he's trying to connect to this port more often, it means that he's trying to do something harmful, because the standard protocol, the standard approach would be to make a DNS query, for example, and then fetch the website or request the time. And that's basically it. You don't need to request the time over and over again. You know, so we're trying to look into this information and try and identify these IPs which are potentially harmful. Because if we manage to collect these in an address list, we could, even if we had the first attack, if it wasn't big enough, if we can contain it, avoid that this attack affects us again if it comes again at later stage from the same set of IP addresses. Because the guys who are trying to attack us have a pool of IPs, and it's very difficult that in the second attack they have a different pool of IPs. You know, so we try and avoid that situation. So what do we use here?
We use. This is a solution that is actually has been implemented into the router we were seeing before. So we should now, the slide will be available, so you don't have to take pictures or something. We don't want to go over all the comments. It's basically a repeating of what we were saying before. We're using just a separate chain here. So let's do it practically within the MikroTik router. So you see our...
So we have the left router, which was the attacking router before, and the right router, which is the one which was attacked, which had the TCP issue.
Clear? Yeah. Okay. Oh, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay. So.
Oh,
sorry.
Screen.
Thank you. Okay. So the left one was the attacking one, and the right one was the one which was flooded with the Syn attack. So basically,
the profiler instead of this.
Okay. So there we have the profiler as well, so we can see. And over here, we have the script, okay, in this chain. We called it a DDoS chain, which is basically, first of all, we have the two rules, because this was taken from a live environment. The first rules is basically taking two address lists, which will ignore DDoSes coming again from our own IPs. We're saying, listen, from our own IPs within our own network, we shouldn't be getting any DDoS, basically. So we're ignoring them from here. Rule number 2 here is the one which is using the DST limit feature, which is basically saying, listen, I'm going to allow up to a rate of 25 connections per second, and if I see this type of connection coming, attacking my network, I will basically add the source address to an address list. Okay? Once that happens, okay, basically this rule, all it's doing is accepting the first 25 connections. If more than that happen, then the address is going to go into an addresses, which is going, in this case, the DOS flood. In our environment here, we're sending a Syn attack directly to MikroTik itself. So basically, we have to filter that, we have to catch that in the input chain. Okay? At this point in time, the first rule will say, drop anything which has been added to that chain. Okay? But before, the chain was disabled. So since it was disabled, we're not doing any pattern matching. So at this point in time, we're going to add that chain again. We're going to enable it, so it is being checked. And again, we're going to launch an attack. Okay. So in this case, we still have a CPU which is high, but our situation is now handling the problem, because if we go to the connection tracking, we can see that some of the connections were picked up when the attack first started, okay? But exactly after the attack started, MikroTik realized, oh, there's something wrong, this guy is attacking me. So the address of the attacker has gone into an address list. And actually, that is an address list, an address which is being spoofed.
So, look at actually the rules that are matching. This one was matching until the connections reached a certain level. Now it's not matching anymore, because it's matching until certain. And now that address has gone into the address list. And so, because it's on the address list, it basically gets dropped now. It is on the input chain. There it is. Okay. So let's go. Let's stop the attack. Otherwise, my MikroTik gets basically. Okay. You see, CPU going to 2%. Start again. It's handling pretty well. Okay, back to presentation.
Obviously, like in the same way we can protect our own MikroTik, like we're doing here, we could protect any other service which would be running behind our network. In this case, obviously, we're seeing higher CPU because the IP being attacked is the IP of the MikroTik itself. But we could have servers behind it, which the MikroTik is protecting, and this would avoid the packets ever reaching our equipment, basically.
So, fancy ideas. One Matthew already discovered, DNS plus NAT. So the idea is to have two feeds, two completely separate feeds, and our DNS with a very short time to live. So what's happening? Normal, the server will be known as one IP. But if that IP is under attack, we will basically switch the DNS reply to the other IP. And our attacker will keep on going on that IP. And our server will be serving normally other clients from the other IP that correctly responds. The remotely triggered black hole, basically the idea is to inject a new route into our BGP. Now I'm talking about our BGP. So that way we don't have to deal with address list because it would automatically block all the offending IPs with all the offending prefix within the AS without having to elaborate any access list. And the other idea is that requires the upstream provider cooperation, but we know they will cooperate because basically it would save them bandwidth, is to create a BGP community that our stream can black hole. So we basically are communicating to our upstream provider, I don't want to receive traffic from those IPs, so black hole them for me. Having an external source feed that with details of common threads originating prefix on the internet updated via BGP. One example is, for example, Team Simru. That's a really nice solution to because they keep it updated. They don't only have bogon IPs, they also have IP that have not been assigned. They also have IP that are commonly originating some threads. And that will help us to have to use complex address lists like the IP, non-routable IP lists, etc., etc. Okay. Basically, as we've seen, DOS and DDoS attacks can be conducted at any level. There are few solutions to mitigate DOS attack at both the router level and the firewall level. However, almost any service may be overloaded by a very large number of requests. Hardware here plays again an important part. A faster router, a faster server, a bigger bandwidth channel will make a huge difference when trying to resist a DDoS attack. Those are the references. The diagram was taken from US CERT, and thank you to Norse for their map. And thank you. That will be all.